Climate. I'm your host, Ed Erickson. This is a program about climate change, about citizens' climate lobby, and creating the political will for a livable world. As you can see, I am in the other Washington, in Washington, D.C. And today is actually Congressional Education Day. It began on Monday, November 12th at the Omni Shoreham Hotel. Mark Reynolds welcomed us. We numbered about 600 strong. We had advocacy training and meetings with our small groups that would go out and meet our national representatives. All in all, the first day went about 12 hours. Virginia Lohr from the Tacoma chapter led the meetings with Senator Patty Murray's staffer, Trey Easton. I asked her if she was surprised by anything there. Please.
We were standing in the hall, and I'd seen this film crew down the hall. And they were looking for a group. They came up and asked us if we were the group. We said no.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, well, are you waiting for Patty Murray from Washington? Well, we also represent Cairo, so can we go ahead and interview you?
Yeah.
It was kind of fun that they went ahead and did an interview of us. And then when we went into the office, we met with a staffer who's just very positive, fun to talk to, fun to be with, and had a lot of good news to tell us about the things that he thinks might be happening in the future.
Yeah. Okay, so this is your, how many?
This is the 8th time that I've come to D.C. to lobby.
Wow. And you're from Vashon.
I'm from Vashon Island now, and I first came 4 years ago in June, and then got recruited to come back in November because they really wanted someone from my district. At the time I was living in Pullman.
Okay.
And no one else would go from that district. And because I had had so much fun lobbying in June, I said, twist my arm a little harder and then I'll go.
Yeah.
And I've been back every June and every November since.
Oh, wow, that's great. So how many of the meetings do you think you've been through?
5 sometimes. I think the most was 7 once.
Yeah, so it's like 40 something maybe?
Yeah, the fewest was once maybe only 3.
Yeah. Wow.
This time 4.
Wow.
So.
All right, so today CCL had how many meetings did they all together? There were.
Well, we know that last June there were 507 that they had, and we always try to get everybody. So I would guess that we may have had close to 500.
Wow.
And there were about a little over 600, I think, of us.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they said were on the Hill today lobbying for Citizens Climate Lobby?
Right. And so and so it's all pretty well planned. I mean, they
Yes, they've got it down after they've been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
Started with just a handful of people doing it, and now in June there were 1,200 people here doing it.
Oh, yeah.
So, they used to probably hand sort and figure out who would be going to what meeting, but now they have written computer algorithms to help them.
Well, that's great. Yeah.
Put everybody in the right meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the ask this time was?
The ask this time was that climate change should be made a bridge, not a wedge issue. We're not going to make progress on this at all if we continue to use it as a way for each party to bash the other.
Yeah.
So that was the big ask.
Yeah. And we got a pretty good response, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. I think people recognize that it's essential that we do work together. Some people were very excited about it, but I think it's also clear that it's not going to be easy to do. Mm-hmm. But our approach seems to be working, so that's treating people with respect, getting them to trust us, helping them see what the issues are. When we lobby in June, it's called a lobby day. When we lobby in November, it's called an education day. So we do it slightly differently. Mm-hmm. What we do is one of the staff members goes through all of the meeting notes from the 507 meetings last time, and notes down what Republicans are saying, what Democrats are saying, and where there's common ground, what kinds of things are issues that matter to them. And then when we come back in on the Education Day, the November one, we share that information with both sides. It's sort of helping them see that there actually is a lot more commonality between Republicans and Democrats than they realize, because they don't have time always to spend much time talking to each other.
What was the surprise about this time for you? What do you think was something you found out that you didn't know that you...
Having done it as many times as I have, I can't right off think of a particular surprise. One thing that was kind of a minor surprise was just that it turns out that the wording that one of the staffers chose, the bridge, not a wedge, that one of the staffers said, wow, I like that wording. That's new, that's fresh. So that made us feel, CCL really does their background on this, and those words were specifically chosen because they thought they would resonate. So it was just really exciting and that was our first meeting, to find out that indeed with some of the people, those words do resonate.
Yeah, well, one of the surprises to me was that I think it may have come out of the Yale study, was that being nonpartisan actually makes them more electable.
Yes, there is a study that showed that. That it doesn't hurt you with your base, with your own party, to work with the other side. They tend to like you better, but independents are much more likely to vote for you or like what you're doing when they see that you are cooperating with the other side. So there seems to be positives to doing it, and there don't seem to be particular negatives. The same study showed that the reason people are afraid to do it is because they think that other people in their tribe think that you shouldn't do it. So they're acting on what they perceive are other people's perceptions, and which turn out aren't actually not true.
No, that's true.
Lobbying can be a lot of fun, and I hope people will want to go try it. And one of the fun things about lobbying is that CCL teaches you how to do it. I mean, it's kind of a terrifying thing. You don't go in there by yourself. As you said, we had the day before where we learned things about what we were going to do. They give you ideas about what to talk to, like the bridge, not a wedge. And you're in there with other people that have done it before. You're not just thrown into it blind. You've got lots of support. And the staffers and the representatives and the senators, I think we're refreshing for them because we are actual citizens, constituents. We're not these real polished lobbyists, and that can be fun for them. And I just hope that a lot of other people will want to try joining us in DC and doing this the next time around, which is in June. They've announced the dates, but I don't remember what they were.
How would you recommend that people try to influence their own representative?
I think anytime you contact them and tell them what you think, that counts. It might seem like a little thing, but just letting them know climate is a concern for you and you want Congress to act. You want Congress to put a price on carbon, and of course, as Citizens Climate Lobby, we'd like you to say we want it to be carbon fee and dividend. And don't worry about how you contact them. Like, we used to think that, writing by hand was better than email or phone calls. It really doesn't matter. We've asked staffers if one thing is different than the other, and they say, no, really, it's just any contact. What we hear on the Hill from some offices is they just don't hear from their constituents enough that climate is a huge issue. They hear that taxes matter. They hear about health insurance, those things, but so many people care about climate but don't seem, I guess there's not the immediacy necessarily, and so we need to let them know. And then tell all your friends to do the same thing. Those are examples of simple things that don't take a lot of time but really can have an effect. And the other thing we know is if just one person, what they actually do is they tally, how many phone calls did we get this week, or letters or emails, and each week they do a tally, and they kind of know which topics rise to the top. So if you do like a letter writing party or a phone calling party, so that they get 20 in the same week, it'll rise to the top. 10 is enough to rise to the top. So you can have even more impact if you do it with your friends.
Okay. That's great. Thank you very much, Judy.
Thank you very much. It was fun lobbying with you today. It sure was.
At the closing party Tuesday night, I asked Mark Vossler of the Kirkland chapter how he got interested in CCL.
Fascinating that you should ask. It was convoluted. I got involved in climate change through a physician group, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and joined their climate task force looking at climate change as a health issue. While I was doing that, my wife got this dandy idea to invite a bunch of people over to our house to watch a movie, Disruption. Disruption was a movie that Bill McKibben et al. Produced when there was a big march in New York City about climate change.
Okay.
They had these people over, and they watched the movie, and they were all energized. They watched the movie. We got to do something. We got to do something now. This is awful. And they all looked at me. Mark, what do we do? Like, how did it become my job? So I researched what groups, and really looked hard. What groups could I use to activate wannabe activists? And the only thing that made any sense whatsoever was Citizens Climate Lobby, because there was something real, meaningful, tangible for people to do on a regular basis to make a difference about something they cared about.
Yeah.
And empowering regular people to influence their elected officials was huge.
Yeah.
And that group grew from like 10 people in my living room meeting regularly. A few people dropped off. We now have 150 people on our group list, about 20 people show up regularly, monthly, in my living room to talk climate.
Oh, that's great. That is great. So you were spurred to do it just because it was out of conscience. You said, this is a problem. And
you identify a problem that you care about, right? And you look for a mechanism to make a difference. And the health angle motivated me because I saw climate change as an existential threat.
Yes.
Something that, as a physician, I can't treat in the exam room, I can't treat in the operating room,
yes.
I cannot treat in the emergency room. So you have to do something out of my usual professional context to make a difference in this. And to do that, I knew that personal change wasn't going to be enough. Quote Al Gore here, you got to change laws, not light bulbs.
Right. And so this today, is what it's all about. Citizens Climate Lobby. Right?
This day, 4.5 years of trips to DC. This was the best of all.
This trip
was the best of all. The vibes we got back, the reception. What was amazing to me is we walked into every single office. Every single office I walked into, they already knew why we were there. We almost didn't have to tell them. We told them, we want you to bridge the divide. We want you to be bipartisan. They were already talking our talk. They were already saying, we want to make a difference in climate change. I have never been so more optimistic that we can make a difference than I am now. It's urgent. It's really easy to look at the IPCC report and say, oh my God, we've lost, and I see people saying that, but I've never seen Congress more motivated to act than they are right now.
Have you ever seen any result? I mean, have you ever lobbied with somebody and then you saw that they voted for something that you may have influenced them to do, or you think you might have made a difference?
I was on the team that met with Reichert a couple of times, Dave Reichert.
Okay.
And Dave Reichert has since retired, but Dave Reichert joined the Climate Solutions Caucus after repeated asks from Citizens Climate Lobby. That's one tangible that I can clearly remember.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
You got to be patient. You don't get a win every time.
No. So today, what do you think was the best one that you had today, the best meeting you had today?
I was really encouraged when we met in Maria Cantwell's office. We were not expecting to have the level of staff participation. We had a staffer from the Energy and Natural Resources Committee come there and speak very, very positively about our work, talk about bipartisanship, talk about the potential of having Republicans on board with this in addition to Democrats, which is key in the Senate.
Yeah.
I came to this meeting optimistic about the House because Democrats have been wanting to work on this for a while, and they felt stymied and they felt depressed. I was pessimistic about the Senate, the Dems losing seats, that the Democrats might have given up, but actually they seem pretty energized too. So gosh, if we can get something through in the House to the Senate, there might be some senators that take this up. We have a fighting chance here.
Yeah.
That I have not seen. I've not seen this much of a fighting chance for actually getting a real bill advanced in the entire time I've been coming to DC.
Wow. So, all right. So this is going to be watched by a lot of CCLers, probably, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
and they can't make it here. They can't do this. What can they do?
Oh my gosh, a lot. Number one, our representatives say over and over again they need to hear from constituents. So the letters you write and the phone calls you make a huge difference. Number two, influential groups. If there are organizations that care about climate change, that can take a stand endorsing the CCL proposal, that's huge. If there are businesses, that's huge. It's nice to have an individual endorser, but if you have, it's not easy, and they know it's not easy to get a group to endorse. If you get a group, an organization, a business to endorse the CCL proposal, and particularly if that organization or business is located in their district, that is highly, highly motivating. That would be, if I had to ask one thing of my compatriots, it would be get endorsements from influential people.
I hope you'll stick around, and because this is December show, since it is winter, a interview with Stuart Chisolm about skiing and the effect of climate change on skiing. So, but we were talking about about climate change and how it will affect the sport and recreation of snow skiing.
Sure.
So, and you were talking about some of the different areas.
Well, certainly. I mean, many resorts have made man-made snow for many years, and that is ongoing. Before the great effects of global warming were so fast upon us, that's already happened.
Yeah.
And that will continue, but it's also going to have really great impact on where resorts can remain viable. And that's just for the industry of skiing, and it's a guilty pleasure. You know, I mean, golfing and skiing are two of the, in a way, more of the egregious private sports to do because of the impacts, you know, and I'm not, that hasn't been lost upon me. I try to mitigate it as best I can, and some of the resorts are very proactive about that as well. I did a little homework before sitting with you here today. Alta in Utah is one of the greenest in North America. Bachelor down in Bend, Park City back in Utah. Park City, I think, reduced their carbon footprint 15,000 tons. Many resorts are reusing water. They're looking at solar and wind to help generate. Whistler, I believe, uses hydro to generate most of the resorts, not the town per se, but most of the resorts' energy as well.
Hydro through rivers and
yeah, there's Fitzsimmons Creek runs between Whistler and Blackcomb, and they have a little hydro generation there, and it runs all of their lifts, which is pretty remarkable. Yeah, I think the industry at large understands what it's about, and those of us who ski, we love the natural environment of the mountains, and that's that's what it's about. You have the privilege of dancing with mountains, and to do that comes with a price, and you have to be willing to pay that price, and that of course has to do with the impact of what we do. On that note, one company, and another Utah company, is DPS Skis. And I don't own DPS Skis. I knew little about them, but they came up with a hugely unique product. They hired 2 chemical engineers to come up with a new wax for skis. As a skier, you wax for the specific snow, or at least a general wax, and it wears off. You put it on, it wears off. The best of waxes have fluorocarbon in them, and when that shears off the ski and enters the watershed, that's a bad thing. And yet you have to repeat that process to have the fastest glide and be able to move on different types of snow. What they came up with is a product called Phantom that actually impregnates the base rather than being on surface. When it goes in there, it's there for the life of the ski. It does not nearly shed the volume of fluorocarbons into the watershed. It's really, really unique. And it was a Kickstarter that I bought into a year ago. And I put that on 2 pairs of my skis, on my wife's skis. I gifted my brother and sister and brother-in-law in Flagstaff. And it's a miracle, because as a skier, not just for what it does, the benefit of not shedding that fluorocarbon, it actually performs in spring conditions, which is a wet, sticky snow, to the coldest of winter conditions flawlessly. It's really remarkable.
Oh, that's great.
So that's an exciting advent, but the big picture of skiing is really the development of areas and doing that for the ones that are new and trying to come on board. They're being scrutinized, and they should be. There was a really big development planned in interior BC, and I believe that was either reduced or totally stopped by pressure. Grizzly bear habitat would have been cut right in half. Their normal migratory hunting pattern would have been disturbed. Most resorts are on federal land. And as such, they're already scrutinized about how they treat the land. Obviously, we're not tearing up plants when we're on 10 feet of snow. That said, how they cut those slopes and the trees that are removed and managing the runoff, as well as all of the effects of what we do while on the snow, ends up in the watershed. And speaking of use of water to make snow, in Flagstaff, Arizona, it's 8,000 foot elevation almost, and they have the San Francisco peaks just outside of Flag. They have a small ski area there. They make most of their snow, or a lot of their snow. That is actually a very privileged and sacred place to I believe it's the Hopi and or Navajo. I'm not as knowledgeable as I'd like to be. And the resort wanted to use wastewater from the sewage treatment to make snow, which has great cultural impact and offense to do so. I mean,
wow.
This is a privileged, great place of beauty and sacred to those cultures, and they want to piss on it, so to speak. I think that actually moved forward, maybe with some restrictions, but it's an interesting dilemma, not just the environmental aspects, but in that case, the cultural aspects.
Sure.
And up in BC as well, there's the tribes of the interior BC are very, very aware of what those industries do to their mountains. So we have to be very diligent about that.
Oh, yeah. So you've been skiing for years, and for years you've been going back to some of the same resorts.
Yeah.
What changes have you seen over the years?
Well, again, I'm also a scuba diver, and I think I've seen more of the dramatic change in some corals that I've been diving with or snorkeling with in Hawaii than I have on the mountains. That said, up in Whistler Blackcomb, here we are just so close to sea level, and yet at the higher aspects of those slopes, you're skiing on glaciers. And they're being challenged. They're receding. Yeah. Because I'm there in the winter, I don't see the effect of that as dramatically as you would in the summer, as far as the toe of a glacier. And yet, it's interesting that Vail, which is a huge Colorado resort that owns many other resorts, they paid over $1 billion for Whistler Blackcomb, and I'm thinking, wow. I'm concerned about how close we are to sea level and the change of everything we're talking about here in global warming, and yet they spent $1 billion to buy not a terribly high elevation resort, which was interesting because it is changing, and where the snow will be in 50 years or 100 years is hard to say. Yeah. So it's the glacier that's receding, and it's part of that. And of course, every winter there's snow, and the snow will pile up again. But doesn't that make it for dangerous conditions? With, what was it? Recently, someplace in the Cascades where a glacier broke and some ice fell on some hikers. Skiing has its hazards for sure, more so for skiers who go out of bounds in backcountry, because you're outside of the controlled slopes. Ski Patrol, they manage slopes by concussion and releasing slides prematurely when no one's on them.
Oh, yeah.
Backcountry skiers are at much greater risk because there's no maintenance of those conditions. And a lot of people think they're experts and find out they're not in the worst of ways.
Yeah.
But that said, it's worth the risk to me because you measure those risks just like scuba diving.
So you ski backcountry?
I have a little bit, but even on slope, it's a full contact sport in its worst of days. And you want to avoid those contacts. But I actually have set myself up to do more backcountry stuff. And if you don't have the skills, the training, and the partners to do that, because you're a fool to do that without that. People, the ones that are truly ready for that have avalanche probes, they've got beacons, they've got a receiver, so if they end up in a slide, everybody turns their receiver on to receive instead of transmit, and they find where you are and try to dig you out alive. And that's not something I look forward to being a part of on above the top or below. So
but particularly below.
For Abbey dogs, aside, but Abbey dogs are the dogs that are trained to help find people, and usually they're finding
corpses.
A corpse, exactly.
Sure, buried in snow. So, all right, so what are you planning next time? What do you? Here it is, November. What are you planning?
Well, last year was a big ski year for me because my wife was gifted a camper, but it was in Colorado. So because we had to pick the camper up, I made the most of it, and I bought what's called a Mountain Collective Pass, which gives you skiing at a number of resorts. So I skied in Colorado. Interesting, my great-grandparents immigrated from Nova Scotia and homesteaded there, but I grew up in Illinois. So my story of my life is I was conceived in the mountains but reared on the plains, and I've never been a flatlander. I've always been drawn to the mountains. But so I skied Aspen. I had two cousins that grew up there in the Ski Patrol. I skied Utah. I've lived in Utah for 4 years. I skied Park City, Utah coming home, and then finished my season at White Pass and Whistler in the spring, and it was a really good year. This coming season, I don't have the wherewithal financially to replicate that. So I have a former brother-in-law in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I may try to make a trip to ski with him. Otherwise, I'll be a little closer to home.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for watching Change the Climate. If you'd like to know more about Citizens Climate Lobby, go to citizensclimatelobby.org. Or you can come to the Citizens Climate Lobby Olympia chapter meeting on the second Saturday of every month at 9:30 in the Olympia Center. Thank you for joining us on Change the Climate.